Welcome to the Configure Price Quote podcast. My name is Frank Sohn and I'm the founder of CPQ Consulting. This podcast is 100% focused on Configure Price Quote, also known as CPQ, and will provide you useful insights into this topic. Hello everyone. Today it's another solo episode since we have some scheduling problems with our guests early in the year, but they should be addressed very soon, and then you have more guests online. In the meantime, I thought about an episode that has kept me busy for a while, and I thought I'd share that with you and hope it's helpful for you as well. So today I want to talk a little bit about the headlines and what was said in 2025 and what is that meaning for you in 2026. And let me do that. I would say over the last year, the CPQ and Quote-to-Cash market and revenue management market has been pretty active, right? So you had AI announcements, there were acquisitions, there is a transition to platform solutions. There were lots of big headlines. And most people experience those through press releases, you have conferences, you have roadmap presentations, and so on. So you hear from some publicly available sources about this. At the same time, I think there is another layer of information that doesn't always show up publicly, that is showing you what actually happens when a customer selects a CPQ solution, when they run their early pilots, when they do early deployments, and when the solution is finally delivered, right? And today's episode is more or less about separating these two layers. So the publicly available information and then this additional information, these additional signs. And it's not about judging one or the other, right? But it's to understand how different public direction and market behavior interact in 2025 and what that means going into 2026. So let me explain the framework a little bit before we get too deep into this. When I say headlines, I'm talking about publicly available, visible information, right? So that could be announcements that you read in the press release, where you have a webinar, where you have roadmap direction sharing, where you have strategic intent that's somehow communicated to you, and so on. So that's everything that's publicly available. And when I'm talking about signs, I'm talking about observable patterns, right? So how buyers, system integrators, vendors, investors actually behave when they have to make decisions. So and I think both are useful, but I think it's helpful to differentiate between these two layers. So, and I have a couple of examples for these that I want to go through, and that hopefully makes it a little bit clear. I will always talk about first the headline, then the signs that I see for that, and then what I see as the implication for it, right? So, and let's start with artificial intelligence. So I think that was the big topic last year, and it was also the move from co-pilots toward agents and more autonomous workflows. And it was also true across industry. And I think AI was increasingly positioned as something that could do work and not just assist with it. So very important headline. You probably heard it in a couple of different ways. What I think is missing a little bit over here with these headlines is sometimes that AI isn't one thing. So at the simplest level, what I mentioned many times on the podcast before is like, okay, you have the selling AI, that's what a user would see. And you have an administrative AI, that's what someone who maintains a solution sees. So they are both different, and it makes sense to look at both perspectives and how that's implemented in different solutions for these two purposes. And also something that comes always up with every customers I talked to so far was the data to use the solution. So you saw it somewhere, you want to use it yourself. What do you have to do to get this data actually available for your company? And what should be the guardrails for when you use it? So you have to see this additional operational sign to see how that could be used for your company in your situation, right? So in this case, yes, you can talk about agents and co-pilots, but the value really depends on if you have the data ready, what problem you have, and how that's implemented. And that might be a little bit different from what you read in the headline, because I see often customers assuming that this will solve a lot of their problems. But I think what it also means, why it matters, if you want to say that, for 26 is that adoption will still be uneven from my perspective, because I think the readiness is more important than the excitement. You get the excitement because of the headline, but the readiness really depends on your operational readiness, on the data quality, the controls you get into it to keep it up to date, and so on. And these are also some questions you should ask. That's why, from this perspective, it's important to know about the headline. Yes, AI is coming. It will be more important, and you could probably talk for days, hours, or even longer about it. But then it's also, you shouldn't talk about the features, just you should talk about the preconditions to use it. I think that's important for customers to ask for that, how they could be supported. It's important for system integrators, for vendors also, to show them how they support this effort, right? So because you cannot ignore AI, but you need to contextualize it for each and every firm to see how it could be best used and how they could spend their dollars most efficiently with AI. Then the next big headline that I have in mind from 2025 is that more solutions switch to a platform, and that is, you want to have less just a CPQ, a point solution. You want to be an end-to-end solution, and you want to also combine that with a unified data model, so that data could be used everywhere. It doesn't need to be integrated in multiple different places. So, and I think in general, the message is also, you want to modernize your solution, you want to have a next generation platform, and you just want to start this transition. Now, that's good to know, it's good to prepare for it, but I think on an operational basis, you also have to keep in mind, most customers, at least the ones that I know, don't move in a straight line. So they will probably be cautious about this as well. So they probably do more pilots, small pilots, maybe some phased rollouts. Maybe they will probably in the beginning have their old systems running, so coexist with whatever was there before you rely on it. They have to prove it first. And then you also have a shift in your discussion from a vision to what do I deliver and how do I sequence this delivery, right? So that's, I think, is also another important point that you have to keep in mind, that doesn't show up in the headlines, but that's on an operational level very important to keep in mind, how you actually get there and how you want to get there safely. So now, when you look at this, why does that matter for 2026? I think the next phase is less about where are we going. Yes, you want to go potentially to this more platform solution, but now the question is, how do you get there safely? And so in this case, your execution becomes the differentiator, not the tool that you use, but how you execute on this one. And that, I think, is important. So because lots of customers, at least when they're interested in this platform solution, right? So they are not hesitant, but they want to manage their risk. And that's important for every involved party to keep in mind how you approach it, because it will make the chance for success higher if you keep that in mind. The third headline from 2025, or at least big headline, big trend that I can think of, is the consolidation of markets. So where you have one solution buying other solutions to offer a broader solution. So I think in 2025 we had some major consolidations. Just think about Logic being acquired by ServiceNow, or Pros and Conga uniting forces, and so on. And you could see that the expectation now is, after years of being more quiet, there will be more M&A activity. At least that's what I expect. And then the question is, okay, that's good, you understand that, but then it's also the question, what does it mean on an operational level, right? So because these M&As have impact, I can say that because I worked for M&A team for a while, and see that they always have an impact, and you have to keep that in mind. So it's not a straight line. You make the announcement and then it works just fine. What is needed here, I think, is also a clarity of the portfolio that's offered and the roadmap direction and the timing. And I could give you as one example over here as the Conga acquisition of Pros. Both have CPQ solutions. What's interesting for every customer is also to know, okay, what are you going to do with these two solutions going forward, right? So, and what's the timing if there are any changes? What changes would there be and when would they come up? Or you could use other firms as well. I just mentioned these two as one example, right? And I think you also, for consolidations, you don't want to give everyone certainty what you're going to do, that nobody falls asleep into this monitoring mode, just wait and see what happens. But you want to provide clarity, and you want to provide the clarity pretty early. And why does it matter? Because you have real customers, they have a solution to run, and they need clarity on what they have to plan for. So in this case, yes, you get the news, but then on an operational level, it means changes, and how do you prepare for these changes? How do you deal with these changes? So because in this case, I would say the deal announce what happens, but the market and the operation still needs to answer on how and when do things happen. And now I'm coming to my last example, and that is really the delivery expectations for CPQ projects or revenue management, quote-to-cash, whatever you want to call it, right? So the general expectation here is that it becomes faster and it becomes cheaper with that as well, right? So because you're spending less time on it, you use more AI, and that's why it becomes cheaper. So the headline, if you want, is easily understood what you can expect going forward. The question is, what does it really mean on an operational level? Because what you still have to keep in mind also is you still have the resource that you have before. These resources have also skills. They only have a certain number of hours in the day available to them. You still need people to do change management, to prepare your team for the changes that are coming up and so on. And you need to prioritize what you want to have implemented in what phase and so on. So while in general the statement long term is understood, okay, implementations should become cheaper because you have more tools. The question is, what does it mean on an operational level? And to me, I think the why it matters here is because the outcome of a project, of an implementation project, really depends on the results that you can deliver, that your team can deliver. And that's also the execution quality. So if that's really good, then also the product is perceived as really good. If that's not the case, it's not. So in this case, is you get the general direction, but the operational performance could be very different from system integrator to system integrator. So you have to have some, or you should have some operational knowledge, how that's actually going, what's actually working, what actually needs improvement, so that you could be best prepared for your project where you have this information also. And in this case, what you have to keep in mind here is also often what looks like a product issue may be a delivery problem, right? So, and you don't want to have too many of these, neither for the system integrator, nor for the customer, nor for the vendor, right? So anyway, so I close here. So for me, the point here was really that I think everyone who's interested in CPQ is dealing with it, should pay attention to all the headlines all the time. I do that I would say almost 24/7. But anyway, so the headlines are useful, but they are incomplete, right? So they don't show friction, sometimes the delivery realities and other problems. And I think with 2026, you can expect more automation, you see more consolidation, you have more pressure to move faster. And therefore, I think it's important to get also some reality check with some of the headlines to see how that is going. Because to me, headlines sometimes also just explain intent, and reality explains really outcomes. And I think that's an important point here at the end. We're trying to do that with our newsletter and share that as much as we can. And keep in mind, we have some NDAs here, so we cannot share everything, but we can share enough to be useful. So I would, in any case, encourage you to look for public information about CPQ on a regular basis. But don't take that for the only thing that's important and true. Try to compare that wherever you can and however you can with operational information to get the more realistic picture on what is really happening, what is working, and what is not working. So I hope this was helpful. And if you have any questions, any feedback, please send it to me. It's frank.sohn@novuscpq.com. And hopefully next week we have another guest. And then you don't have to listen to my solo episodes anymore, at least not for now. Thank you very much, everyone. I'd like to thank everyone for listening and hope you learned something interesting today. If you like the podcast, please go ahead and rate it on iTunes or share it with your friends and colleagues. In the meantime, you can find us online at www.novuscpq.com. So long, everyone.